Marathon dev stream in an hour? Wait, what? Is it a funeral? As a matter of fact, yes. So for anybody who missed out on what happened here, is that there is an artist that was on Twitter, and these were things made in 2017 that this artist made, and these things were not inspired by, they were directly copy-pasted by Bungie. Like, I'm talking about, let's get down to the pixels, all right? That is in Marathon. That is the Twitter artist's art. That's the same thing. It wasn't Bungie, it was just a single guy. Well, no, I mean, there's a process, there's a, like a process of things that go through this. And also, honestly, I wish they had stolen somebody's ideas for character design. Maybe the game would have looked better. But anyway, of course, Bungie's not obligated to hire me for making a game. Oh, this is what I said about it, right? After looking at the references, it's obvious that this was directly copied. Embarrassing for Bungie. They should at least give the artist a few $100K, and at least, and honestly, they should hire the artist and fire whatever clowns they have working there now.
All right, we're live. Hi, everybody. How's it going? I'm Joe. In case you don't know me, I'm the game director here on Marathon. To my left here, or potentially on right on your screen, depending on if it's mirrored, is Joe Cross, everybody's favorite Joe, our director on Marathon. Sitting across from me
is the audio director.
Is Andrew Witz, gameplay director, and we're gonna spend some time talking about some stuff today. Our show is a little bit different today. We planned actually to show a lot more stuff, but for a lot of reasons we're about to get into, we decided not to show a bunch of the stuff. But we are going to be discussing a lot about what we learned through Alpha, some of the plans that we're going forward with. But before we get into that, Joe Cross has some sort of topic that he wants to talk to you all about.
Yep. Thanks, Joe. And hey, everyone. I'm Joe Cross, franchise art director of Marathon. And wanted to take a minute to talk about some of the events from yesterday. It came to our attention, and sorry, I wrote this, I wanted to make sure I get this message right. It came to our attention that an artist who worked on Marathon in the early stages of pre-production took a number of graphic elements from a graphic designer without permission or acknowledgement and placed them on a decal sheet that was then checked in 2020. The decal sheet included icons and text elements.
They can't even figure this out?
Ended up in our alpha build.
Okay.
And there's absolutely no excuse for this oversight. And we are working on and 100% committed to our review process to ensure instances like this don't happen again on Marathon or at Bungie. A few of the things that we've done over the last 24 hours and what we're doing to shore up the review process are as follows. We've reached out to Anti-Real, the artist in question, and followed up to ensure that we do right by this artist. We're auditing all of the previous work by the artist, the internal artist, including the environment decals already in the build, which is part of why we're delaying some of the content we're going to show today. And we're committed to removing anything that is
stolen or not.
Questionably or inappropriately sourced. We're doing a very broad decal audit, and if we locate any other details or elements, we'll make sure that those are eliminated, recreated in-house for sure. Hundreds of artists have worked on this project for years, internally and externally, and we share many influences, including modernism, Swiss typography, 2000s style vector art, cyberpunk, and of course the original Marathon trilogy. Our style is a result of all of those inspirations. And it's also worth noting that none of our external partners who've worked on branding or any part of the visual design of our game were involved with this situation. And lastly, personally, I have a huge amount of respect and admiration for artists working independently and producing and making a living doing commercial or fine art. And we've worked with many of them. It's one of my favorite parts of the job is to make those connections and create content and collaborate.
Wow.
And so to that extent, I want to send my personal apology to Anti-Real whose work was used in this case. And I know how unfair this feels, and we're doing everything we can to make this right with her. Her work is fantastic, and we clearly share mutual appreciation for a specific genre of graphic design.
We know.
It's very exciting, and I'm excited to have folded that into our style in general. So thanks for listening, and thanks for your patience.
So absolutely, and thank you, Joe, for coming in and chatting with us about that. If they have any further questions about that, feel free to ask them as we go along. We're probably going to transition now and just talk a little bit about Alpha. And Alpha was a big milestone for us. There was a lot of stuff that went into it. It was always intended to be kind of like a smaller slice of the game. Wits, right? As we were going into it. Feel free to talk, by the way. It was always kind of meant to be a smaller size of the game. It was always meant to be sort of like testing a little bit more of that like core combat and some of the baseline of the progression systems that we have, And it was really great to hear a lot of the feedback, especially from those who played the game, as well as people who witnessed it, and sort of get a sense of where everyone was attaching to certain things and where they didn't see as much meat as they wanted, or things that they didn't like at all, or things that they did really like, So there's a wide variety of opinions that sort of came about. A couple of things that we really learned, we really wanted to talk about, though. One was the idea of sort of the core of the survival game, I know we talked about this a lot, Wits, the survival game being this sort of idea of not just running through the environment and trying to survive other people trying to shoot you or the enemies, but all the different challenges of trying to get out. And we feel like some of the bigger things that we missed on that we know we wanted to see, but we kind of didn't land super well was the idea of resources and the survival economy. If you want to talk a little bit about that, Andrew.
Yeah, we basically we were dropping too much ammo, right, and too much heals.
How does this keep happening?
And so people were lasting the session for a really long time, and we just didn't really kind of push you out. And so we knew it was going to happen in the build, and so we've been really focused on how we can improve that and get more hazards in the game. There's a lot more hazards in the current build. There's a lot more evil things we have in the game, as also and half the guns are in the build, and so the other half are not in the build. So you haven't even seen half of the weapons. I know that there was some folks that thinking that that was the full library. It is not. It's half the guns in the game, and they were dropping too often too. We were dropping too many guns, too many long shots. I know long shots were a thing.
Long shots were OP,
We're focusing.
Oh man.
Yeah, there was the core of it is ultimately we wanted more stories where there was about using your resources wisely, and we just didn't. We didn't feel like we put people or we didn't put players in a situation where they needed to use their resources wisely, and as a result, there weren't enough stories where it was I ran out of this thing and I had to figure it out, or I really needed this thing and I was searching around trying to find it. And so we want to build more of those stories moving forward. And so we've been doing a lot of internal iterations. I know even our most recent build, we've stripped back a lot of those pieces, and we're seeing some kind of crazy stories come out of that. So so that's a big part of the survival economy. You talked a little bit about survival challenges, the idea of the environment being a little bit more hazardous to you, Or is there any stuff you want to share there, Andrew? Little bits?
Yeah, we're working on we're working on a bunch of stuff. Working with Lars's team. Also, Lars is here.
Lars, if you want to talk about it too.
Yeah, so Lars, you should talk about all the fun things and all the ways that.
How are you trying to kill players, Lars?
Well, how are you trying to kill the game?
toxic plants now that we have in Martian perimeter. So going between POIs, you will have to keep a lookout for that. For the people who got real used to switching to knife and just going full bore, you're not going to be able to do that any longer in the game. So we're thinking about all those kinds of things in the world that make sense. Like the world really does not want you there. There's obviously the UESC. They obviously don't want you there and are trying to stop you. But maybe that's a good segue to, I don't know, Wits, if you want to talk about some of the UESC stuff we've been looking at lately as well.
We definitely know that the UESC were when they took a lot of damage, they were like overly reacting, like in hit reacting, and so we're looking at reducing what's called like first sighted, which is like they look at you and they're like you, and then they get into combat with you, and then they take some shots. We want them to be more stand their ground robots and hit that killer mecha infantry fantasy that they kind of want to bring. So we're adding we're looking at transitions for going right to combat when they see you. We also noticed that when players were engaging in combat with the AI, they couldn't ever like disengage. They couldn't like kind of be like, okay, like I'm fighting. How do I break line of sight?
It's
and
like
they kind of
stealth options didn't work as strongly as you wanted to, right? In that way.
Yeah. And so we're looking at that. We're looking at we had there's a few bugs we had where you take out, like you have your knife and you take out like a recruit, and then like the entire POI, the entire like point of interest, like knows exactly where you are and they're running towards you. That's a bug we're working through right now with the team. And so the intent is that that makes noise obviously, and the nearest units like investigate that area versus the entire hornet's nest comes barreling towards your direction. And so we're looking at both increasing their challenge and making them more satisfying to fight, as well as working on their perception and how they kind of find you, right? We want to kind of have this engage options where you can do some damage maybe, and then like you don't need to finish the fight and stand and fight. Is that you actually might want they see you, and there's a moment in time where you can actually like break and kind of get a chance to get away. But we still want them to be threatening versus like you can just run around them, right? They need to really push back.
The sweet spot you're kind of looking for is ultimately that you have more options for how you like divide and conquer and tackle them depending on how you play. But if they do get an advantage on you, each individual unit feels a little bit more threatening to you, right?
Yeah. Like we were there. There's the shield unit, the big shield unit, for example, is. If you get first shot advantage on this unit, especially like a precision headshot or something, sometimes they would like hit react, and then they wouldn't kind of do a bunch of their abilities that they kind of have that actually like charge you, and they like kind of tuck behind a shield, and you can't actually shoot them, and they're perfectly tucked behind that shield, and they push you, and they want to like do this melee attack.
I don't know what they're talking
about. Getting taken out before they can kind of do that, and so we're looking at looking at their vitality in ways where they don't feel like they're bullet sponges, but that we really require you to play this like marksman game, but also that they challenge you to kind of have different ways to resolve the fight with them. So the team's really kind of digging into kind of like different ways we can kind of get into that and resolve that.
Somebody's saying in chat that the sound guy's DEI. Is that true?
Yeah, there is those disengage moments where like, I'm going to tackle this fight with this unit, but I'm going to do this thing. Like there's this hit react they have. They kind of like power down for a second. They kind of wake up. It's like this big hit react if you do a lot of precision damage. We're looking at maybe that if you duck behind cover or something, that they don't know exactly where you are when they wake up, for example. And so that also plays into kind of more of the like solo viability in terms of like you don't have to like 1v9 all the robots.
No, that totally makes sense. I know another topic that sort of came up when it came to survival games was also the pacing of like sort of every given session, right? Like I know we talked about it internally. It's like there tends to be like a front-loaded tension
it's
instead
going
of
up,
runs where a lot
crazy.
of tension happens at the beginning. There's a lot of brawling, and then it sort of like begins to quiet out as you're sort of playing through the rest of the session. And we wanted to make sure we shake that up a little bit. I know we've talked a little bit about how event pacing folds into that.
I wonder what he's thinking about.
Lars, I think you and your team have talked a little bit about it, right? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, that was really good. We actually got a lot of good data from the alpha about how event pacing was working, but also just sort of being able to, like we got lots of good feedback about some of the events and how difficult or not difficult they were, how frequently they appeared or not frequently. And so we're looking at all that data, and we also understand, I think you said a really important thing, which is we also realized that as the session went on, the tension started to drop. Like if you were going after and you had run into a bunch of players, after a certain, you never know quite exactly how many players are left in the session. But after a certain amount of time, you can guarantee that the PvP population at least is dwindling a bit. And so our challenge that we're looking at right now is how do we increase the world danger over time,
today?
and we can handle that in a bunch of different ways. But we've got some pretty neat ideas there. Like is it about complexity or requirements for exfils? Is it about increasing PvE or world resistance? Is it about pacing of the activities? I think the answer is all of the above, and so like we're looking at all of those things right now, and I think we have a lot of good knobs and tuning capabilities there. So I'm pretty bullish on our ability to make that. Yeah, the longer you stay in the session, the less safe you feel, but also the more you're like, maybe I should get out of here now. So that we want to increase those sort of thoughts from happening too.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense.
Joe, you mentioned immersion too.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that definitely touches art. And one of the things we're hoping to show today, or show next week, is some of our fidelity improvements. I know that there were a few very work in progress areas that got a lot of scrutiny in the alpha build, such as like exterior lighting and a perimeter map, and some of our lobby. So art is full steam ahead on a bunch of those improvements.
Yeah.
Very excited to show.
That's good.
And then the other side of immersion is kind of the runner stories that we want to tell,
right?
And the kind of fictional fantasy. And to that extent, we're working closely with creative direction and the whole team to sort of really dial in some of that fantasy.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the work that you guys are working on, which has been really cool to see. I mean, everything from we had a bunch of stuff we wanted to show today, but by the way, we decided not to show it because we're still scrubbing all of our assets to make sure that we are being respectful of the situation that
so then
Joe
how
talked
have
about
you
earlier.
Seen it
but
and you think it's good?
There's a lot of things we're doing to try to increase that immersion. I know we've even added really
how does that make
details
sense?
that have sort of helped to make it a little bit more immersive, like the blood that runners bleed even in water and things of that sort as trails and indicators of damage that they've taken.
Right.
I've also seen us like sort of putting more entropy into the world, where we see a little bit where the idea of the abandoned colony comes a little bit more life on
sure.
Mars.
Yeah, some of that stuff planned, some of that stuff definitely sort of heightened by the reaction to the cinematic trailer, which I think I love. It seemed to go over really well.
Wait, they're running ads?
Making sure that we're sort of following that fantasy.
Wait, are they running ads?
To whatever extent we can.
There's no way they're...
material response,
they
occlusion,
are?
lighting, fidelity. That does so much in terms of immersion.
Yeah.
From a technical sort of base experience.
No shot.
Even some of the foliage iterations.
Yeah, some of that shimmer.
Yeah.
Lots of exciting stuff happening under the hood. Team is doing amazing work. Hopefully we can show it soon next time.
Yeah.
And also the sort of whole lobby infill experience.
It's a pre-roll.
We're
not sure about that.
Delivering that whole sort of
yeah, you can't turn that off. I'm pretty sure.
Fictional fantasy.
To be fair, I'm always fair.
Mercenary, heading down to do dangerous work.
Yeah, a lot of the UI that we went in with was definitely in a temporary state too, and so for us, sort of finding a good way to make it a cohesive experience has been a lot of the effort that we've been on top of recently, right?
We've always, paying off the cyborg fantasy has always been our a goal and a sort of carrot on a stick for us.
Oh God,
that's
Art
sort of
Raiders!
And
God damn, that's good.
Towards the end.
And there's sort of like two parts to that, right? There's like the cyborgy part, right? Which is like, I'm this robotic entity. And then there's also the part where it's like, you are this mercenary. So you're kind of doing like the thing, which is like, how do I describe it? It's like, you're not like necessarily a good guy. You're not necessarily a bad guy. You're kind of going against the status quo in some degree, right? And so feeling that out a little bit more in terms of the experience, right?
Yeah. The runner fantasy has always been a blue collar fantasy.
Yeah.
For the most part,
What?
like you're doing a job.
What?
This is dirty work.
What?
And you're, taking contracts from sort of nefarious or questionable sources, but so communicating that visual.
That doesn't mean that you're blue collar.
It's very exciting.
That's awesome. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. There's So we've been putting a lot of work into, especially sort of doing some iterations on the visual updates, and also thinking about how we reinforce that fantasy as we're going forward. Another area we've been talking a lot about is crew play. And sort of thinking about the variety of different ways that players play the game. We definitely had people playing. A lot of people playing in solo matchmaking. We had a decent amount of people who played
I'm being
solo
chill.
unmade.
This crap needs to be addressed.
Just basically running around in the world of solo. We had a lot of people, a chunk of people who played
fans
in trios,
are weirdos.
across the different board. And we definitely found that through the feedback and also through a lot of the experiences that were relayed to us inside of the alpha, that the crew match-made experience just wasn't that great, And so we're looking at a lot of ways to potentially solve that on our side.
The stream.
Some of it is thinking about how each individual can contribute. I know we've been talking a little bit, Andrew, about like the 1vx situation, if you want to talk a little bit about that. It's like how viable you feel like you can turn around a battle and stuff like that.
Yeah, we did some updates in the Alpha Nose Live because we really wanted to move the conversation forward because we thought we got enough feedback on certain things, and we wanted to actually like take some swings at some
the
problems
art director's reading the chat.
We implemented the shield change we did was actually something that we were getting to for our next milestone.
Wait, he is.
That was in our next our current milestone, I guess, because it's an older build, right?
Yeah.
But,
I'm trying to.
It was in our current milestone. We ported it over.
I'm trying to see
ASAP.
if he is or not.
And so, really appreciate Runner Team and everybody kind of getting that change in. Because it was a bit of a content change, but we thought it was worth it to actually learn more about time to kill and being able to, the power
Arc
of
Raiders uses
shields
AI
in
generated
the
content,
combat
looks like
economy
ass.
and reducing the overhead of shields. And so, like,
imagine losing the
majority of
AI.
effective health was in your baseline health pool versus like in your shields. And
what the hell are you
we had
guys
some good
talking about?
Changes that kind of came out of that, and so we we're keeping
Just
that right now in the current
project.
build, and we're focusing a lot more on effective time to kill in
Update. Joe
specific
Cross
ranges of a
stole
weapon.
that sweater.
So an example is the overrun. We were kind of like the overrun, the base gun in the game that you kind of start off with. We were kind of we were nervous about like upping the damage on it because I know folks were like, this is kind of like not the best gun. It's like, well, it's the starter rifle that requires a bunch of attachments to kind of get to its like big power delta, and so it requires all that investment to kind of get to a good spot. We were kind of nervous about like just upping the damage onto it wholesale, and so what we're doing is doing it's called like
what are they talking about?
A skill ceiling audit, which is like how skillful do you to be to have like the gun in its base, like what we call like gray or standard state, which is no attachments, and then what is it like what is the skill
I don't know
demand at the floor at the base effectiveness, what are we asking for players, like how much aim skill do you need, and then like where are the major flaws in the gun so that like when you're putting attachments in, you're build crafting, but also like removing as many flaws as you want in terms of like what you have a hard time controlling with the weapon.
They're spamming now.
So we're
spent
doing that
5 minutes on a drama,
that,
and you only read from the dev team tweet.
Out, it's
clowns.
like, oh, this person was good, and so when you're lower shields versus higher shields, we want to make sure that
this shit's funny.
Your guns are doing
funny.
damage in the ranges that they're really supposed to. So if you get the drop on somebody, you should be effective, and it shouldn't be like you need certain rarity guns or anything like that. So we're working on that a lot.
Devolving.
We have it's a bit spicy right now, like there's some SMGs that are a bit hot, in the current build, but like we feel like they're appropriately hot when they're you're in CQC fights, and so fights resolve in close quarters with a close quarters weapon, the way you expect. LMGs are kicking way harder, a lot more demand there in terms of the recoil, which is great. We hit some of the snipers. We're actually kind of reevaluating snipers a bit, not like wholesale, like what are snipers, but more kind of like what are they at the base value where they're not like too effective. Because we definitely noticed the long shot had a lot of demand, and like as expected in this kind of genre, snipers have like a lot of effectiveness in terms of like they have to kind of feel like they're lower time to kill. So we're working on making sure that the time to kill is great for the shield differences. So when you're like going up against a purple shield and you're a gray shield, you feel like you actually can win, and there's multiple kills per clip that's possible with the weapon.
It's not guaranteed, but there's a way to win there.
There's a way to win, and that leads to the skill part. Like time to kill is always about skill. It's about effectiveness, right? Yeah. And then like it's also about like window of opportunity as well, and it's kind of like how you triangulate like overall time to kill recipe. And so we're focusing on skill fidelity. We're focusing we're focused on every single aspect of that triangle. And so we're looking at we have this like how many purple shield kills per clip, which is kind of like a spicy thought. But we're really iterating fast on that on the weapon side.
Cool. That totally makes sense. I know another part of like sort of the crew experience is also like the idea of like, do I have the tools to communicate with my crew, right? Like, I know we had a bunch of challenges with even voice chat for players inside of the game, and we're definitely looking into that in terms of thinking about how do we make it easier for you to even enable voice chat, or like how do we make that part of your flow so that you can do that. I know we've talked a little bit about ping system, how do we add texture to the ping system to make it easier for you to coordinate with your team if you're not on voice chat. And do you have any thoughts on that one? I know you and your team have touched the ping system, but
ping was in a very baseline state for alpha. Like I would say, it was a very like it was a very MVP even for alpha state. And we weren't super.
Shut it down.
We weren't super happy with what kind of where the deficiencies of where it was at. And so we are spending a lot of this milestone really plussing up ping, and we're also looking at things called a communications wheel, which is like how can you effectively communicate to teammates? How can you like basically ping things in a container? How do you ask for ammo? Stuff like that. So yeah,
if they didn't hate their audience, they would have made that female character way hotter and given her way bigger tits.
We're also talking about some contract stuff too, Lars, like as well about like the fabric of contracts between like multiple players. I don't know if you can talk a bit about what your team's cooking there.
Yeah, Lars, tell us about contracts.
Yeah, of course. There's a lot of work. We again, like it was great seeing people's response to, I think, working along AI, like the sort of different factions. And so obviously we feel really happy with at least that first slice that people were seeing in the alpha, and obviously not, that was it was a small chunk of the content. And then sort of looking forward to when you're talking about crew play, like how do we lean into that? How do we make that more understandable? How do we sort of surprise and delight players around when they are working with a random match-made player, right? For example, how do we highlight those things? How do we make them understood? How do we reward in ways that make more sense? And how do we make you want to do those things, or like feel encouraged to want to do those things and work with, whether it's the people you pre-crew up with or the people you randomly got put in to matchmaking with, or whether you're trying to do it by yourself and taking on those extra challenges. But I think the interesting part is now figuring out what things were working, what weren't. I'll say, like, from my perspective, and this isn't the team's perspective, this is mine. Like, I think some of those things could have been more challenging, and so looking at that as well. Yeah. And looking at contracts as like there were some that were great where you're like, hey, cool, I can go download this audio file and now I can go throw myself off a cliff. Not a real example, but you know what I'm saying? Like, just to be able to say, like, I did it. I think we want to take a real look at having a mix of things that are more difficult and challenging to do if we think about priority contracts, and then the other types, maybe they're a little bit more sort of backgroundy, like doing things. And so if that makes sense. So we're taking a hard look at all of them, and I think we have some really good plans there.
So this is Cosmo. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Awesome. We're getting a lot of questions from chat, so I want to jump in. A lot of art questions. I have a question from WigXU. I have a question, a genuine one. Instead of scrubbing so many assets, would it not make more sense to employ the artist, who obviously has nailed the aesthetic you're looking for, and keep the assets as they are?
This guy's getting fired.
Sorry, Joe.
And
Cross.
I can jump in with the answer unless you want to take it, Cross.
I know Cross
is on his phone.
He got kicked out of the Discord for some reason. Like, I'm staring
at
his machine, so that we might have a technical issue right now. Do you want to? They're basically asking, wouldn't it be easier just to hire someone to remake the assets?
That's not what they. That's not what they
sorry,
said.
do you want to repeat the question? Apologies.
Yeah, go for it.
Can you repeat it? Yeah. Just so I can relay it to Cross, because Cross can't hear you right now. But
instead of scrubbing so many assets, would it not make more sense to employ the artist, who obviously has nailed the aesthetic?
True.
So the question was, instead of scrubbing all the assets, wouldn't it be easier to employ the artist who made all the assets?
Yeah, I mean, and for what it's worth, we're confident the majority of the assets in that capacity are original created internally by our internal artists. We would love to work with Anti-Real if that's an opportunity that presents itself. I mean, that's part of what we sort of reached out to communicate. It's a very at this point, it's a very small sort of set of assets. The decals themselves are the kind of they're details that are sort of placed on the sides of buildings or crates or something like that. So we absolutely do need to replace them, and we would rule in sort of any sort of way of doing that, including contracting, collaborating, or working with the artist.
So Joseph Cross was following
additionally,
this
I think
person.
It's a great question.
Just to sort of add on to that, additionally, when we run into situations like this, we also feel like something slipped through our net, and so we have to go back and look at everything just to make sure that nothing else slipped through our net, if that makes sense, because it caught us by surprise, and we want to just make sure that we're doing the right diligence to ensure it doesn't happen again. So either way, we're going to scrub all the assets just because we want to make sure that we didn't miss something else.
Yeah, because PR, this is bad PR. Another art question. Let's go. We got another art question.
Yeah, but that's a good question.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of just like general. We're getting a lot of general questions in the chat, Cross, about like the overall aesthetic. Do you want to like speak to that and like kind of like where you're getting like the influence?
Let's talk about the let's hear about the art.
Like making the art. All right, you have to relay this question again, Joe.
So there's a lot of questions just about where your inspiration for a lot of this art style and sort of like where that comes from.
Yeah.
And how you think of the art style.
How do you get the art style?
Yeah, I mean,
I know
it comes from a lot of sources, a lot of genres. I talked about it a little bit online, probably a couple of years ago. Graphic design is obviously a massive part of our game, and typography in general. That's one of the things I sort of am the most proud of in a lot of ways, is sort of the idea of elevating typography and graphic design to sort of the forefront in a game or in an industry that typically doesn't, I think is sort of safe to say. So in terms of that, the
replace it with Comic Sans
from there's even some DNA shared, I think, with Destiny, with sort of Swiss modernism and that whole genre of sans serif typography, all the way up through 2000s, early 90s, which is where I mentioned before. I think there is a lot of overlap there in terms of inspiration with Anti-Real, the Designers Republic, vector art, that kind of thing. Just an example of sort of an exciting part of graphic design history that feels connected to, sort of naturally connected to games. The studio that sort of drove a lot of that worked very famously on a game called Wipeout, in a very early PlayStation game, which is a big influence for us.
Wipeout.
And then all the way up to sort of current trends.
I think it is.
May or may
I think
not
Wipeout
be,
has been an inspiration for them.
Genres.
That's true.
There's sort of a deconstructed kind of minimalism. Anti-design is another genre that I've heard it referred to. And this is just specifically thinking about typography and sort of the sort of
this is good
layer of our branding and sort of in-world.
So why'd you steal it?
World building. There are a whole slew of influences when it comes to architecture and character design and world building and natural palette. So it's all a big soup.
Okay, another art question.
Awesome. Let's see. Wrapping up the previous subject, which is like sort of on crew play. I know that we've also been exploring internally, doing a lot more tests with mixed crew sizes.
What?
We're still thinking about how we want to approach the idea of not just 1vx, but like, are there different crew sizes that we want to support? Like, do we want to do something that's more about solo duo, or things of that sort? We haven't really landed on a discussion point yet. Those are all investigations that we're sort of pursuing. So nothing we can commit to there, but we're definitely looking into stuff like that. We're also looking into ways that, you can communicate in some way with teams that are not your team. We don't know exactly what feature that could be, but we've been talking a lot about that. Yeah, so we're looking into a lot of stuff on that front to sort of improve the overall like sort of social complexity of the game, but also make it better for matchmade crews and also crews of different sizes, whether they be ones, solos, duos, or trios, to find a good experience. So. Let's see. What is another area that we've been touching on? There's so many things. Oh, progression. Yes. Progression rates in the alpha were way too fast. Everybody went really far, in the alpha in a very short period of time. Some of it was a lot of stuff was being gotten out. Some of it was just our tuning on factions was way too fast. Some of it, I will say that that's one part of it that was true. Another part of it that was true was, what's up?
Money, credits.
Yeah, money, credits. Credits and material economy we're thinking about as well. We want to make sure that credits and materials have really distinct purposes for how you use them and that you feel the value of using them. Right now, we don't think we landed that super well in the alpha. It was a little bit muddy. And you end up spending a lot less money than you gained, and the credits economy was a little bit more grindy than we intended. There's a lot of things like that we want to support. Some of it is rethinking sort of how those things are distributed inside the black market, so different things that you'll buy with each one. Some of it is also, we know that part of our aspiration for the black market is that you are able to upgrade your way into sort of customizing what your black market does for you, gives you reliable ways to build the kit that you want to, especially when you're recovering, or if it gives you options that actually continuously help you. And that's a little hard to do. It's a little hard to target which upgrades you really, really care about right now currently. So we're thinking about how to iterate on that as well.
Yeah.
And we're doing some work already to improve that experience.
Is that right?
And then lastly, there's a lot of progression systems that we just simply haven't put in the game yet that we are looking to help sort of make that journey a little bit more awesome, especially as you go further into it. Things like our archive system, which is a little bit more about achievements and collection stuff that we have, as well as there's additional other things inside of there.
That's why people play extraction shooters.
Factions that you haven't met yet. But yeah, and we're also trying to take all of our factions and give them a slightly more distinct identity against each other. Right now, they read definitely differently from a lore standpoint, but how that folds into some of the upgrade systems and some of the contracts they ask you to do is not as distinct. So we're refining that as we go along too. So
just the way it is.
Yeah, those are a lot of the big beats of what we are tackling.
Yep.
What else was there in that list? I don't remember. Andrew, maybe you do.
I was going to say, it's a good amount.
It's a good amount. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
It's a good amount. I think the overarching deal is we definitely have gotten a lot of points to improve on, and we're actively improving on them right now. And some of our investigations for bigger ones, but I think in general, the survival game being more robust is a huge one. Feeling more immersed in the world, having the world feel more alive.
Yeah,
you hitting on the fantasy of being a runner, right? In what we call infill, which is going from matchmaking into boots on the ground, doesn't feel super great right now. So we're actively working on that.
I don't know.
I think there's all the gaps that we heard either from feedback or that were data that we looked at in the game of how players resolve things. I think we have a bunch of big improvement points, and we're swinging pretty hard at all of them right now.
Yeah, definitely. I know we've spent a lot of time sort of beginning a lot of the work has already begun, but sort of also just talking about all the sort of work we are going to do about tackling a lot of these issues as well.
So that's a good segue into a question from IMTK, who's asked, what's the biggest negative feedback from the alpha that the team is looking to change by release, or at least close to the period after release?
The stolen art. I know the answer
points,
to that.
I'd say.
The stolen art.
I think the survival stuff, the run texture and the survival stuff, is probably one of the biggest ones.
I know the answer to that.
Because we're putting a lot of different points into it. We're thinking about how Lars mentioned earlier about how exfilling is different, inside of the game. For example, we might change some of the rules around exfilling and sort of the way it works right now.
They can't do proximity chat?
We're also thinking about everything from AI combatants to
why?
To resources.
Were they retarded?
All as part of that.
Actually, I know why they can't do proximity chat.
Pretty big amount of stuff that we're doing in that space. The other big area I'd say is actually the creative fantasy stuff, which we're really, really trying to land a little bit better, like the immersive fantasy stuff. Wish we could show you some examples.
It's not toxicity,
but there's a lot of work.
Don't let them play that off.
Make sure that it really feels.
Audio isn't their thing.
That it mirrors the intensity of the experience that we intend on the planet. Really, a marathon is supposed to be about surviving Tau Ceti and the Marathon, ship, and surviving that situation. Right now, it just feels like it's purely about surviving other players, and we want to really make sure that that all comes together, both from a creative and gameplay standpoint, in a really impactful way.
Maybe they can find an anti-art
Yeah, I'd say the biggest one for
the audio
on combat is just
maybe that way they can fix it.
We need to make the game we need to have a lot more options for players to kind of resolve different scenarios differently, which is a hilarious statement, but it's you need to be able to again go to the point earlier, you have to be able to peel off of AI, understand how to fight different AI, different players, how you get out, get more variety in there, and then we did have a lot of good feedback around. It requires 2 people to do anything in the game, or 2 or more, and also how much you're reviving, and at the time it takes that for that other enemy team or enemy squad to revive, and how long.
Yeah, we didn't even mention that we're revisiting some of the rezzing stuff, but
the res stuff. We're changing how that works, so that when you actually do get a pick on an enemy crew, they can't res in the time that it takes you to heal to full, which I think was a kind of a big problem.
Jesus Christ.
So we wanted to make sure that you by yourself have more agency and can actually affect more change in the world, but also the world really pushes back a lot more on you. So I think that's probably the biggest trend of feedback on combat that we're actively, tackling from a ton of different angles, on combatants and on, the runner side and on the weapon side.
Look at this guy.
Yep, and
So I got a question from No, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I was saying from the art side, it's focusing on immersion and sort of divided into fidelity, sort of the technical side of our visual
Fidelity.
world, and then it's the sort of narrative. It's supporting the narrative of the runner fantasy, which there's a lot of work to do, and those are the 2 biggest takeaways for us from the art side.
There's another question, Cosmo, you said?
Yeah, so I got a question from Curiosity. It says, going forward, will we see more ways to customize and visualize, represent ourselves as players within the runner? This being one of my main questions for both gameplay and immersion.
That's actually a good question.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think we are going to be doing a little bit more. I know Andrew's team has been working on skin work for a while, in terms of just thinking about how to, give you visual options to express yourself. We're not going to talk super deep about it because we're still in the process of figuring a lot of those pieces out, but is there anything you want to share on that front, Andrew?
Yeah, we were looking at different, ways for their, the runners to be customized.
Why isn't the art guy talking about the art?
In terms of their visual sets. We're also looking at making making weapon stuff too, to express your weapons and stuff, different ways and multiple ways, not just one.
That did trigger something that I think we forgot to talk about, that we want to talk about, was build crafting. How we're sort of thinking a little bit more about how we want to make more distinct build crafting elements.
We don't want skins,
we're tackling
man.
build crafting improvements in 2 vectors. One,
I want to play my own guy.
Team is really figuring that out right now. They have some really good ideas. We're trying to basically learn from what we had in the alpha and then extend it in terms of implants being a bit more interesting, and kind of cores having a lot of the interest that people were kind of chasing. And so we're looking at how we can get plus up implants.
The atmosphere is so serious.
So they stand,
I guess so.
Up better alongside the cores. And then on weapons, we had perks only in the upper tiers of attachments, on purple attachments and stuff like that. So you'd have a purple magazine that had a perk on it, or a purple barrel that had a perk. We're taking a lot of the perks and putting them into the chip attachment, and so they're not divided by the weapon or the weapon family anymore. The chips are generic, and so if you find a chip, you can put on any gun.
So it gives you more of an anchoring element then, this verb that you can throw on a thing, and then
and there's more chips at lower rarities too. So we're really looking at how we can get more of that build crafting into the weapons versus you need a specific thing, and there being more considerations for what verb you want to add to the gun overall. So that's a big push that we're doing right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
so I got a
from
question
an art
from
side,
Ethan.
I'm super excited about
the
whole cosmetic side, the fashion game, and that we're gonna deliver. Our base characters have such a unique look and sort of specific to our visual world that it's a question we've gotten a lot about.
When you say our visual
what kind of range,
world,
what kind of
does that
aesthetic
mean?
or visual range do these runners support? And their answer is all of them. So, yeah, we're very excited to start rolling out looks and sort of ways for players to identify more specifically with certain runners or styles or fashions.
Guys, just stop. Turn it off.
Ooh.
Just turn it off.
Cosmo?
So I got a question from Ethan.
Turn it off.
Has the team reconsidered its stance on proximity chat or exploring other ways to encourage more emergent social interactions between rival players and
Great
squads?
question.
Yeah, I think that's one of the areas that we're still brainstorming around, is like, how do you use Signal to other people? Like, the classic friendly, like what's our version of that?
Well, voice chat.
Or is there a way that you can use those things in interesting ways between
voice chat is how you do it
right now? We don't have a solution to it just yet,
Use the wiggle,
but we
not
are talking
Tarkov.
through it right now. Yeah.
All right, I got a question from Agent. Says, would love to hear about the materials for each faction. I feel like there's way too many faction materials and it's insanely overwhelming.
Can you ask again about
Materials
voice
for each
chat,
faction.
guys?
Oh, you mean for the upgrades?
Ask
like
about
to
why they're
purchase the
not
upgrades and
including
stuff like
voice
that?
chat.
Right.
Ask that in the
I
chat.
think right now we're talking about the materials economy a little bit, how it all aligns to different things.
I want to know.
There's a couple things that I think we've learned from Alpha. One is that we want more materials that are kind of like a little bit more memorable and evocative, like we said. We think we like things like tick milk inside of there because it just kind of has this like interesting, evocative, but you
dick
kind of
milk. Did
question
he
what
say
it's about.
dick milk?
So the creative theming of some of the materials we're taking a second pass at, but the other part of it is there is a lot of materials and they're all like sort of value graded, like in terms of thinking about like greens.
Wait, he's not
blues,
from
and
Blizzard,
purples
is he?
and stuff like that.
Uh-oh.
I try to make it a little bit easier for you to understand the value of a material, as it sort of is used across different things between like sort of recipes for trading versus upgrades and things of that sort. It's like a sort of a top-down, how do we use materials kind of thing that we're looking into. We do think that it's less about how many materials as opposed to it being clear how they're used, and I think because part of it is that we do want there to be a big diversity of different types of things that you want to loot, but it's about you associating it with the value that you're going to be getting from it. That's super important, and I think that we're still a little loose on that.
Everybody knows why.
Yeah, we did a big pass on relatability and stuff like that.
Relatability,
which is we actually had a pass in not for this build that everyone played, but the current build that we're in. And there's a bit more, I would say, theming, like in terms of what goes where and like what things that would go with weapon upgrades, and you'd be like, okay, like I kind of understand that. And so there's a lot of theming discussions, a lot of relatability discussions. We're still iterating on the look sets of them as well, how they sit in the environment. Still looking at the looting moment as well. So when you open a container, that it feels really good right now. It kind of feels like this like pop in. I know that like some folks feel like that it kind of like the pop in feels like, or the pop in of the loot when you're going through a container. The searching essentially is what it is. It feels a little bit like, your internet is slow or something. And so we're really trying to make it feel like it's like you're actually searching through, and that feeling really rewarding when you find something in there, whether it's a material or a valuable or something else. So yeah, I think that we're looking at the organization of the materials, what they are, what they're used for, and then
you have 2 Windows updates. Yeah, I know.
When you find a specific one, you're like, oh yes.
It's got us uncomfortable angry.
The other thing, it's probably, I mean, we haven't had a
good.
question about it yet, but I feel like we should talk about it, is bag space and all that kind of good stuff, right, Joe?
Like in terms of like thinking about, we've
Why
definitely
is he even on
we've
camera?
definitely gone back and forth on a lot of things, including around backspace, which is like we want you to feel the tension of obviously what you pick up and how much of it you pick up, right? But we also want you to like think more about what, like right now, for example,
just leave,
I would say
man.
Our looting is very much based on sort of stack value in a size, where it's like we have a lot of things that accomplish. It's like how much value do you get stacking something inside of a specific slot as opposed to getting a variety of different types of values out of things,
so why no proximity voice chat?
And we might be changing some icon sizes or things like that in the future, or like basically some of the sizing of different types of things inside of your bag just to make it the puzzle a little bit better, but there's a lot of iterations we're going to do on that front. We are going to make it probably a little bit rarer for you to find bags, but we're going to try to make it easier for you to like reliably get them from the black market and things of that sort. So we're shifting some of those.
It's almost like they're
equations around.
punishing him.
Yeah, base bag space is always the topic
Like
of
you're gonna
conversation.
sit there and you're gonna
Base
like
bag
it.
space is always the big discussion.
I think we're still talking about base bag space. You know, like basically the thing is we don't want you to not
This
feel
is
like
what
you
you
want to get a
get.
bag. You know, right? Like I think it's like it's weird if you always feel like you have enough space and you don't need a bag. You know, but I do think that we're still one, like we still want to make sure that tension feels.
You're not
right,
really
you know?
asking questions. Answering questions? No. What about
So I got
proximity
a question
voice chat?
from Zionless. It says, is there plans to add guaranteed ways to build craft? I heard lots about build crafting, but not being able to get a loadout I designed without hopefully randomly stumbling
Jesus.
upon it sounds bad. I would like to see crafting system or at least have the option to change cores with some material expenses.
I think we're trying to make the lower level of build, like the baselining of
How many viewers do you think the live stream would have if it wasn't for the stolen art?
Establish through your black market a little bit easier, you know, like acquire and build in that way. But I don't. But there's always going to be like a difference when it comes to high rarity things. High rarity things, like for example, there will be builds that involved having a really rare item that may not be something you can always have. But like we want you to get more involved at the lower level of build crafting, where you feel like you can actually kind of do that kind of thing.
I mean, I'm sure dozens of people would have tuned in.
I think we agree with the statement that was in the question, which is like it feels hard to maintain a build. And we need to, we're looking through a bunch of ways, through black market or like through bartering or something like that to kind of like be able to
now? We will
get
if
the
it
right
goes over
verbs.
an
Maybe
hour.
it's not the same
I'm
thing
assuming
that
it's
you
going to
want,
go for
because we
an
still want you
hour
to
and
kind
it's
of
about
go
to
and
be
loop
over.
things, but we want to have you have verbs that you're like, I like when I'm playing glitch and like this is like the overall verb set I would like for the glitch, and you having more opportunity to be able to go back to that well versus like, though my access to the well is purely based off of the randomness of the container.
Speak again?
I think that's it. I think it's like if you think of like if the like lower level version of it, the middle version of it, and the perfect version of it, right?
Ooh.
We want you to have access to like the lower or middle version, depending on how you've like done that. But the perfect version of it, I think some pieces will still be things that if you lose them, you'll have to find them again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Drifter wants to know, is there any discussion on reworking the resurrection of dead teammates system? I'd like to see this addressed before launch, as rezzing dead bodies seems free is bad for the tempo of the game.
We concur. Yep, I'll just jump in and say yes, we concur. Yes, we concur. Whereas about a bunch of work is going into it right now. We basically have our one axis of a solve we have for right now is increasing the resurrection time and also having it so that every time you go down, the timer does get increased. And so if you keep on going down, like you kind of like your ability to come back into, back from the abyss is harder and harder. We're also looking at, we also did a bunch of changes in the alpha around like the timer, saved progress timer. So when alpha first came out, it saved your progress the entire time, and so you could like get to halfway, take a fight, and then go back and kind of just pay for the half of the res timer. We did have a regressive decay on that, so it goes down. And we're looking at other things too. That if that's not enough, we definitely know that. Rezzing feels a bit too free. We're also taking a look at the messaging. I know that there's the little stick figure above the bags and stuff that we adorably call the little gentleman above the bags. We're looking at that actually being a tell, so you can't just like camp the bags the entire time. Wow. We liked the texture of being able to know whether or not like a crew was downed and like making combat decisions as a crew about that, so you can kind of like coalesce around the information. But I think we're seeing that once you give too much information, obviously like it just like you can have too much action in terms of what to do and where like you can stay in the area knowing that there might be like a clutch play happening or something. So I would say we agree with the baseline is that rezzing is too free,
yeah.
and we're not looking for just purely punishments where if you do get fully dead, like you feel like coming back and being alive is like not worth the time. That's definitely something we don't want to do, and so we're trying to make it so that there is a thing for continuously dying and then rezzing.
We got 5 minutes left. If they don't end it in 5 minutes, we're done.
But it's not a guaranteed thing.
I know we've talked about it, but I think the sort of place we're trying to land ultimately is that if a person gets down,
I want to see if they're going to end it
like
and
not
say
down,
anything.
but like not completely eliminated, but like down.
Life is
right?
suffering.
Like
is that
down.
true?
Raising them
I
in
think that's what
combat
Joe
is hard,
said,
but
right?
it's doable. And if they get eliminated, getting them out, like raising them in combat is really, really, really like very almost difficult to do, right? You really want to do it once you've cleared the area. Is that the intent?
Yeah, we want it to be that like doing it in a fight is not as you don't want to take that on as often as you did in the alpha. Like I think that's something we're seeing is that like you saw folks in the middle of a fight go in the back and like res somebody, and then like now it's like the numbers game of it's like okay, it's 2v3, okay, now it's 3v3, okay, now it's 2v2, now it's 1v2, okay, now it's 3v2, and so we're definitely working on that, and so not that we definitely don't want it to like remove it from the game entirely, because we do think that it gives a bit more of that social texture to the crew play, or even like if you're playing whether a duo or a trio or something, but we definitely don't want to make it like the obvious choice where there's like they don't have we want death to matter.
The
and
names
I think that,
of the people that are speaking.
There's a
I don't even
feeling,
know who's talking right now.
Death does not feel like it matters.
Yeah.
Like.
So I've seen a lot of questions in chat about like where are the aliens, and there's another question like where is the 4? Are they coming? You want to speak to any of it?
I mean, we have plans for like a lot of alien stuff coming in the future, that we won't really
want to
talk about. There is some other stuff that has to do with like the 4. We have a touch of it already that we have in testing, but I can't. But I don't know if we're ready.
It's not gonna happen.
Talk about all those plans yet. I mean, like it's content, but it's not kind of we're ready to show yet. If that makes sense. But
yeah, part of like part of the baseline of Marathon right now is the table stakes of the universe, right?
Yeah.
And then
table stakes.
We're trying to build, but not like build in like a forever way, but like build aggressively towards.
Who's talking? Nobody asked these questions. Somebody asked
the
a question in chat. Why
I think
is your
everyone's
game
kind
so
of like
good?
leaning at and kind of like and heading towards and like in their wants.
Somebody asked,
but
is it hard
trying
working
to
on a game
get
with
there
such
in a
high
way where
expectations?
we get the table stakes, and then we go from there. Even some of our weapons, I know that there was some folks that were just like, where's the 4 rifle, right? Where's the giant pink 4 rifle from the first Marathon game? And we're setting the baseline, but that doesn't mean that we're not invested there or anything.
Yeah.
It just means that this is the baseline of where we're going to get to. We're definitely conscious of starting from a place that we can grow and get crazier from here. And if you start at full volume, there's kind of no place to go. You're going to get to the ceiling and you crush up against the ceiling pretty fast. But that doesn't mean we're not invested in those areas. I think we're pretty heavily invested.
Yeah, I mean, like ultimately, we're at the start of a journey that we hope Marathon is taking towards. Telling a much bigger story. But you want to start at a place that makes sense.
Yeah, there was a really great conversation yesterday about something in this vein,
Jesus.
And the excitement was very
this guy's
high
a fucking savage
about it. So
yeah.
If you like,
oh my God.
if you like aliens and mystery, I think we're actively having good conversations about that.
Okay, well,
I feel like we talk a lot on here. We have conversations about. There's things we're building. I guess
there are things we're building. There's things we talk about with the goal of building, and then things we talk about knowing. We'll be building them even further in the future, and all those things are true.
Yeah.
It's like, what do we do?
All right, we got time for one more question. Are there any plans to expand the verticality of the early game maps by increasing their depth and complexity? For example, by adding more underground locations that could be unlocked through collective community progress or completing some kind of raid-like mechanics?
We've talked about how we use we're probably going to be shifting around how we use some of the existing spaces, to be fair, like in terms of thinking about how we're going to add more complexity in ways that we approach those maps, right, Lars? Like in terms of thinking about it, but like I know we've talked about how as like a live game, we want to continuously sort of like add to these maps and think about them in the future. But yeah. Lars, I know you guys have talked about it.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it, where you were just talking about the alien stuff and how we start at the baseline. I think the maps, we think about it in the same way. And obviously, there were some nooks and crannies in the maps that were in the alpha.
You think so?
And it obviously wasn't all of the content we plan to have when the game comes out. And so, but yeah, we see it as, again, creating like this really satisfying baseline and then looking for room to grow and how we increase that complexity over time. And I would say some of the maps, the like newer maps that we're working on right now, take that into account.
Yeah.
Even more so than Perimeter and Marsh. Even though we had a lot of those conversations early on about Perimeter and Marsh as well, and then which saw things like the underground sort of gold locked room that was underneath AI Plank, or the sort of twisty and turny tunnels that are underneath bio research. And so again, I think it's like starting at the baseline and then figuring out the right things to add and thinking about that approach from first principles going forward too.
Yeah.
All right, Joe, do you want to close us out with anything?
Yeah, once again, I want to appreciate everybody for like sort of not just joining us here, but also whoever participated in the alpha or whoever was part of watching it or just even part of the discourse. We really appreciate it, We're really like excited that a lot of people are interested in sort of seeing where we evolve this game and sort of how we're continuing to iterate on it and make it better. So thank you all for the feedback. Thank you all for the questions. Thank you all for the sort of support and for sharing your feedback and opinions with us. It's all super valuable, and we've been listening. We're like constantly talking about how to tackle it. We're doing a lot of things already to tackle it. We're sorry we couldn't show anything this week. Unexpected conditions came up, but next time we want to be showing you a little bit more about what we're working on, and hopefully that'll be exciting to see. But yeah, thank you all very much.
Wow.
Look forward to talking to you again soon. Yeah.
Tell them to raid me.
Thank you.
Darkness, my old friend, I've come to talk with you again.
Well,
because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was.
That's just the way it goes, guys.
And the vision that was
that's the way it is. So they didn't really address it. They just talked about some bullshit for a while. Man, I really gotta say, guys, this isn't looking good for Marathon. It's not. There's nothing that's looking good about this at all. It's a shameful display. I mean, look at the amount of audio issues that they had. Like, again, you can't figure out a live stream. You can't figure out your audio. You can't get a Discord call to work. You can't even get their names on the screen. You can't fucking figure out, you can't do the art the right way. The characters look like garbage. Like, this is it, guys. So, there's, you ever heard the phrase, sometimes you know when to hold them, sometimes you gotta know when to fold them? I think it might be time to fold. I think it might just be time to full. We did a poll during the event, and it was about if the new name for Marathon is either Art Raiders or Concord 2. It seems like Art Raiders came out ahead, but Concord 2 had a pretty good amount of showing as well. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. Art Raiders 1000. Yeah, there we go. That was a disaster. Wow. Bro, that is fucking iconic. I'm gonna be honest, bro. That is fucking iconic. Oh, jeez. Wow. Man. That's too bad. Poor dude. I honestly, he was the one that's, you are in charge of the art direction of this game. And it is yet another flaccid, boring, lame, like Western video game with a bunch of ugly, androgynous, weird-looking characters that are not appealing to anyone. And you've done this. Like, so even besides this, like, this is, it sucks. It sucks. The whole thing sucked. And so it's DEI slop? Well, I'm not going to say that, but I think a lot of people would. I'll tell you that. And so, anyway, that's apparently what's going to happen. Bungie should respectfully close the project, salvage what they can. Yeah, maybe they should. And how fucked was that? Uninspired thievery on display with total lack of passion from the dev team. I mean, this guy at least seemed like he gave a shit, and I'm sure some of the other guys gave a shit too. But, man, I really feel bad. The art for the game is, like, some of it is okay. The stuff they stole was okay. But the character designs were just garbage, and I don't know what they were thinking by going after them. And, man, they're real. Users 4. There we go. And seeing so much of you defend this shit is abhorrent. It makes my skin crawl. Seek help. Tomorrow's live show will be the most uncomfortable thing to watch. It will be the most uncomfortable thing to watch. Yep, there it is. There's no way to be tactful about it. Ignoring it is bad, and even having a message at the beginning doesn't really mean much when 90% of the stream will contain stolen art. Yep, well, I didn't either. Then it hit me. I didn't even think about this. It's going to 100% be awkward. Well, it certainly was. The game is cursed. Yep, it seems that way. They deserve every awkward, prolonged second that comes with it. I doubt they'll say anything because of HR. Well, they did. And so there we go, guys. There's the event, and we'll look at what some of the new posts about it are. And there it is. There it is. Wow. And wow. Do you think it's a bad time to talk about the Thief Runner? Yeah, I think so. True marathon inspiration and marathon style. And post alpha, please don't fumble the stream. Please don't fumble the stream. Well. No. There it is. I guess so. They fumbled it. Well, I don't think it was really that good. I think that honestly, it was going to be bad no matter what. It doesn't matter what they would have done, what would have happened. It was going to be bad regardless.